The influential public policy voices.
Hey, look at this. We're live. It's been so long. Welcome back, everybody, to the Hoff Report with your host, Wayne Hoffman, and I'm joined with Senator Ben Toews.
Hey, good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. This is your first time, huh?
Yep, it is.
It's good to have you on here. Senator, you're freshman, been only in office for a little more than a month, and you're drinking it in through a fire hose, and seem to be doing a pretty good job so far. Although you haven't cast any monumental votes yet. Have you even cast any votes even in committee? I don't know that you. I mean, apart from many ministerial types of votes, you haven't done anything uh, beyond that. I don't suppose.
Well, there has been a little bit. My first vote was actually with Senator Herndon's bill, and his bill was to take away the rape and incest
Mm.
exclusions for abortion. And so I'd been told initially that, you know, bills that were introduced by senators would for a print hearing would be printed, and so I was really surprised in that case that there was actually a motion to send it back to the author, and so I voted not to send it back to the author because I thought it deserved a print hearing. So yeah, it was actually my first ever vote. Was at odds with the rest of the room.
Yeah, that
And,
was in the in committee. So yeah, you haven't had any floor votes yet. Why
no,
don't we just dive right in because it's kind of an interesting thing that happened there in the committee where you were under this impression that as a matter of courtesy, at least the Republican members would get their bills at least introduced and possibly have a
correct.
hearing. So that was surprising to you, I take it.
Yeah, it totally caught me off guard. I thought I was going to be you know, the freshman senator that sat there and kind of watched how things transpired and voted for the for it to go to print. But then it suddenly turned a corner and changed totally. So yeah, that was a big surprise to me, especially for my first my first ever print hearing.
Yeah. By the way, I'm keeping tabs on the messages in the chat and will relay any questions or comments from our viewers. And the first one from Ryan, he asked, "Why aren't I in the IFF studio in Boise?" Well, I'm up in the north part of the state, visiting with our supporters up here, and I actually have my daughter lives in Eastern Washington, so I get to stay over at the farm in Eastern Washington when I'm visiting donors up north. But I'll be back in Boise on Monday, so that's pretty exciting. But that explains the reason why I'm not in Boise today. I'll be up here for the remainder of the week and then back in Boise on Monday. But so when you got in the legislature, you probably had some different impressions about what the process was about and how it worked and everything. What things were you expecting, and what were some of the surprises?
Actually, I mean, overall, other than that initial print hearing, everything has kind of gone as expected. I had expected things to be a little bit more contentious than they are. On the Senate side, I'd say that everybody's been very helpful and welcoming, and for the most part, there doesn't seem to be resistance to a freshman senator being able to get hearings with bills or different things like that. Of course, it's early on in the process, so we'll really find out later on in the session.
So, what happened on that abortion bill? Why didn't it get introduced?
Well, yeah, I mean, the big surprise was there were three members of the committee, of the State Affairs Committee, that were absent. And so I think that kind of changed the dynamic. And of course, they were all Republican members. And so we were left with 2 Democrat members. And it was almost like the Senator Herndon presented the bill or the routing slip, and then it was just like silence for a few seconds with somebody. I'm waiting for somebody to go through the formalities of saying I moved to print the RS, and then instead one of the Democrats makes a motion to return to the author. And so in the discussion, I dissented and pointed out that the real question is the personhood of the baby, because we would never in a million years say that someone should be punished because a relative has done something wrong. In this case, the father in a rape situation or an incest situation has obviously done something horrible, but why would you punish another person in the family? And that's essentially, to me, what's happening in that situation. So I expressed that. I said, if you know, if it's a person, if the baby's a person, then there's no reason why we wouldn't at least send this on to be printed. And ultimately, it was voted down, and I was disappointed.
What's the reason for that?
The reason it was voted down, I would say that the bottom line reason is that not all people that call themselves Republicans are on the same page on that issue. There's definitely a contingent that, but even then, I don't understand. It's just a print. It's just printing it. It's not
Printing the bill just authorizes the potential for it to have a hearing. And it doesn't even have to have a hearing. Potentially, the committee chairman could say, well, we'll go ahead and introduce it, and then he or she can decide whether they actually want to hold a hearing on it later. And this wasn't even afforded that opportunity. It seems like a policy question worthy of debate.
Yes, definitely does. And that, I would say it may have been, if I was to give a benefit of the doubt to a fellow freshman Republican senator, I would say that maybe there's just kind of a misunderstanding of what we were doing. That it wasn't voting yes, like he wasn't saying that he'd necessarily vote yes after the hearing even. It's just voting for it to be printed so it could have the potential of having a hearing. So I mean, I try to be gracious to other people because I need a lot of grace myself as I'm learning the ropes, and so I'd hope that that's the case. And the other Republicans there, from what I could tell, I don't know if they voted at all. So the next meeting, I called for a roll call vote in the first 2 print hearings to make sure that there was a clear vote. And then I didn't in the third one because it was kind of pointless, because it was going along just like I thought it was supposed to, where everybody would send them on, even if they were controversial, they were sending them on. So I still don't know exactly what happened there.
So is that the surprise then, that the conservative Republican ideas seem to run into a buzzsaw over there, or?
Yeah, I'd say that one, but the other, I think we've heard 7 others or 6 others other than that. All of them, what I would say, fairly controversial. Something to do with transgender, something to do with a couple, maybe 3 of them to do with Second Amendment rights. All of these, another one to do with abortion. All of them went through just fine. So I do think that since it was the first one, maybe there's all the other ones have been printed and have the potential for a hearing. So even though they're controversial.
Now, you are also the vice chairman of the Senate Education Committee. And I told people that because there are so many new members, it wasn't going to be very shocking to see a freshman become vice chairman of a committee. And here you are. What's that been like?
It's been an excellent experience for me so far. It was my highest goal, honestly, was to be vice chair of education specifically.
Why?
because I believe it's our education system is broken in a lot of ways. I always say there's good schools, there's good teachers, without a doubt, but there's also some serious brokenness in the system, and so as a result, I mean, it's the future of our society or our children that are going through the system. And so I'm passionate about looking for healthy change. And one of those changes is education savings accounts, which I think creates accountability for a system that has been essentially a monopoly for far too long.
What are the odds of that happening?
Um,
The passage of
I like to
it.
think I like to think that they're really good, honestly. But I've had other members who've been here longer, and they'll start to say, it's they'll say something like it's refreshing to have a freshman come in who's optimistic. And so when I hear those kind of comments, it makes me think that there's not a lot of hope. But I'm going to drive towards it as hard as I can and do everything I can. And I think we have some out of the box ideas of how to make it happen. And Senator Lent, who's the chair of that education committee, I'm really encouraged talking to him. He's a very, very thoughtful man. He doesn't make a snap judgment on things. He seems very open, and so we've been having a lot of conversations about ESAs and whether it's dispelling myths or going over the nuts and bolts of how the one that we're talking about would work. And I'm encouraged with my conversations with him. There's a lot of pressure being put on him by the education establishment. I mean, they're like, you're our only hope, Senator Lent. You're our only hope.
You have to stop this.
Senator or Representative Yamamoto. They're like, you have to stop this. And so I believe from everything I've seen that he's going to do the right thing and allow us a hearing, certainly a print hearing, but also a hearing, and let it rise or fall, based on its merits, not based on a chairman's drawer.
You're a co-sponsor on that legislation. It hasn't been introduced yet, but my understanding is you're a co-sponsor on that.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Now, certainly, I have a suspicion that people kind of see the writing on the wall. The public wants education choice. What are the odds that your bill gets watered down to the point where it's only usable by a certain segment of the population, and how would you respond to that?
I think that there's definitely going to be forces trying to do that, and I know there's already alternative bills doing what I'd call, education choice light or something, and those are out there, and there's a real possibility that they would try to water it down. We have some ideas of how we can counteract that, and I think the key is for us to get this going early, so that we can look at alternatives if we run into those situations.
Are there other things? You said you want to be the vice chairman of education, which I mean, that's just amazing. Are there other education things that you're looking at that either sponsoring directly or some of your colleagues sponsoring that you hope to see done this session?
Yeah, there's not a lot other than, I mean, I'm really focused on the ESA, and that's a heavy lift just by itself. So that's my biggest focus. There's some smaller things. I have one bill that I'm looking at carrying that would just simply allow kids who are going to a public school to be able to choose which public school they want to go to, which I think is kind of a no-brainer. And once again, I mean, I go back to the stories that I heard when I was going door to door in my community, and I heard some heartbreaking stories where parents are feeling like they're stuck with leaving their kids in schools that are unhealthy for their kids or opposed to the values that they hold dear. And so I mean, there's always like a practical side. Like on the practical side, I'd say ESAs being market-based are going to drive the cost down of our education and the quality up. We know that that's what competition does. And so that's the practical side. On the more like emotional side, I hear these stories of parents that are in these tough situations. Some of them have the money that they can pull their kids out of a school that is teaching things that are counter to their values. and they can put them in a private school or they can homeschool them. But there's some parents that are in a situation where they can't do it, and they're stuck with their kids being in a situation that is really bad for them, and that the parents are stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so part of what the ESAs accomplishes on the, I'd say the maybe the emotional side, is it gives these parents an option to keep their values by allowing the kids to be able to use public money that's put in a savings account that's earmarked for that child, and then they can put them in a healthy environment that matches their family's values. And I think that's really important, and it's kind of obvious, honestly.
What did you think of the newly elected superintendent of public instruction's comments to your committee a couple of days ago, where she indicated that she doesn't support that kind of a system?
I'd say I was disappointed, but not surprised.
Oh, you were not
I've
surprised?
actually No, I would say I was surprised, because in her campaigning, it seemed like she was a supporter of school choice on the surface. And I think that it probably comes down to semantics and using the same terms and meaning different things. So I had talked to her after she was elected, and after I was elected, and getting into more detail, and realized pretty quickly that she wasn't on the same page as what school choice would mean. And so,
She
yeah,
touches it in a way where it sounds as if she supports it. She says, "Oh yeah, I'm for school choice," and then she says something like, "As long as it doesn't take money away from the existing education system." And well, okay, well, how does that work exactly? And in her mind, any other program that would compete against the existing education system is competition for money.
and guess what? The only thing that really changes a monopoly is competition for money.
Right.
So it's the reality of what is needed. And the interesting narrative is that it's an existential threat to our public school systems. And I would actually argue that it's exactly the opposite, because you can prop up a system that isn't working only for so long, but you can create competitive pressures that will actually improve it in the long run. And that's what this would happen. There might be that's what would happen in this situation. I think that there'd be some competitive forces, but I think that the public schools will innovate and thrive ultimately, and it will be healthy. They'll have market forces they'll make their quality go up and the costs go down. So I'm really hopeful for the public education system and whatever innovative education solutions come out of an ESA.
You know, I have asked this question of other people who have been in the position that you're in, either as chairman or vice chairman of the Education Committee's House and Senate over the years. And the question goes something like this: notwithstanding the fact that it says in the state constitution that the state is supposed to have a system for public schools that's uniform, equal, and thorough.
Sure.
The question is, should the government even be in the education business, in your opinion? Not forgetting that it says in the state constitution that you're supposed to do it. If you could wave a magic wand, should the government be in the education business?
That's a great question. It's not something I've thought a lot about. I would say that it's something that I thought about more before I got involved at the state level. I thought a lot about it in the legitimate role of government for our federal government. And for our federal government, it's really cut and dry. They're totally beyond what they should be doing. In the state government, obviously, I swore to uphold the Constitution as it is right now, and I will do that. But the question that you're asking me is theoretical. I just want to make that really clear. Theoretically, I'd love to see a market-based system overall. I think that it would be healthy, and there'd be innovation. And honestly, I mean, I asked a question in our committee meeting the other day. I said, we're adding all of this technology, and technology usually makes the cost go down. But every indication I was getting is that technology added to the school system, our education system in the public sector, is making the cost go up. And it's totally counterintuitive. Like in my business, I add technology so that I can lower my costs.
Right.
It's an investment. And so it's hard for me to fathom that we couldn't have an education system that, based on the realities of the world we live in with the technology. I often point out that you can take a lot of classes at MIT for free. You could literally put together an extremely high level education for yourself from your home, and maybe it's a cohort, a group of students together, so you have some of the, I think discussion is healthy, and it's good to have other people involved, not just you and a screen. But you can literally put together an amazing education. I mean, my daughter took, who I homeschooled, she took a Constitution class from Hillsdale as one of her capstone classes for graduation. And I mean, she was essentially was taking college level classes while she was in high school. And so it's hard for me to imagine that you couldn't have a robust education system with what we have currently, separate from public.
What do you think has stopped the public school system from doing that? What's the hitch in the get along, if it's not just the fact that it's a government institution, a monopoly that is sort of protected from market forces?
I'll explain what I've learned from Senator Lent, who's, like I said, the chair of education. He points out that a lot of our education system is built on sort of the industrial model, and it hasn't moved on to the knowledge, the new, era that's knowledge based, and that's information. There's so much information out there. So it's like I think it's a little bit stuck, and it's trying to move into this new era, but hasn't been effective at doing that. And of course, that's not that surprising when you don't have competition.
But you mentioned Hillsdale, and that's interesting because in Idaho there's one or possibly two Hillsdale charter schools, one in Fruitland, and maybe they're just starting one somewhere else. Maybe
in Post Falls. Yeah,
is
in
it?
Post Falls. Yeah.
Okay. Has it started yet? Has it opened up yet?
It hasn't opened yet. Nope,
Okay.
They're still working on it. I think their goal is to open it next fall.
Here's my question, because every time I mention, education choice and things like that, somebody will mention, well, Hillsdale's got a charter school in Fruitland, and I think that that's great and wonderful, and they clearly do great work. But the question I always have is, why is the type of curriculum that Hillsdale is offering the exception and not the rule? Why doesn't Idaho's civic standards call for the same kind of lessons that Hillsdale already provides in their charter schools?
I think that's a fantastic question. There's actually, I'm pretty sure that there's actually a school district that adopted, I believe, Hillsdale curriculum or something similar up north. And when you ask the question why isn't that everywhere? I would say it's because people are just getting involved in their school boards that care. The people that are really conservative and care are getting involved in their school boards now, and so they can actually be a part of that process. And that hasn't been the case. It's been more. I don't want to be too critical of the school boards out there, but I think that there's been more like the state is like, here's the suggested curriculum that will, teach your students what they need to learn to be able to test to the state standards. Because really that's a lot of what drives it, is being able to get the information in the heads of the students so that they can pass the test, right? And so my perception is that a lot of the curriculum, it's like they're not looking into what all the curriculum is teaching, just making sure that it gets those standards covered.
But if that's what they're doing, if they're spending all their time teaching to the test, why are test scores so terrible?
I think because the reality is that there's a bunch of other information in there that's bogging them down. They're actually teaching a lot of other things too. So it's like, yeah, this information is in there, but then the curriculum comes with a bunch of other baggage that teaches them things that they don't really need to learn.
Now, in previous legislative sessions, and this is I think it's my 29th session. I don't remember how many sessions I've done. I'm losing track of time, but I haven't seen the education committees in the House or the Senate really concentrate on higher education. To what degree do you think that's going to happen in your committee this year?
Well, there's been a lot of talk already, and I think we've got their attention with the questions we've been asking. Um, someone overheard a few people that are part of the education system sitting in the audience today saying that they're a little bit reluctant to go and in front of the Senate Ed Committee because we ask a lot of tough questions. So
Oh,
I think that's a
that's a compliment.
I think it's a compliment. I mean, we're engaged. We're not being nasty or difficult. If you listen to the questions, if you watch those the committee meetings, but we are listening closely and we are thinking about what they're saying, and it's not just business as usual. Give the report. Nobody's engaged. Walk out of the room. So um, I don't know what in that process will uncover or what the solutions will be that we'll find. But I know that when intelligent citizens are engaged, that a real difference can be made, and that's really why I'm here.
The typical question, not to say that the presidents of the universities don't come to the committees. They usually are asked questions like, "What's going on with your latest research project? How's the football
Mhm.
team doing?"
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I mean, for
of
example,
course.
would you be asking, or somebody on your, would you expect someone on your committee, not necessarily you, but maybe you, asking Marlene Trump how the leader of critical race theory ended up being paid thousands of dollars in public money to speak at Boise State a couple or earlier this week? I mean,
I think that question's already been asked, and actually, yeah, that
that's
question.
really
I think it was asked informally, not in the meeting.
okay.
What we have asked, and I asked after to the president after the meeting. I was just kind of curious about some of their hiring practices because they have a provost that they're looking to hire. That's uh, sounds. I don't remember the exact title, but very DEI.
Yeah, it's on our website.
Yeah,
That Anna Miller did a story on it. It's I'll find it, but it's like the vice provost of
inclusion.
inclusion and belonging, I think is.
Yeah, inclusion and belonging. So, I asked him after the meeting. I asked him about that. I said, it seems like we're really driving DEI into the very core of our institutions when we're doing that. And he seemed like legitimately concerned. He said he didn't really know about that. He said sometimes those are actually funded by third parties. And that was the answer. Just so you know, the same thing, the same answer for the guy, the anti-racist guy who spoke, supposedly anti-racist. That guy, I guess, was everything was paid for by a third party, and it wasn't public funds. That's the story that we're getting.
Sort of ish. They're saying it's either not. They'll describe it as either being not appropriated funds or not taxpayer funds. But what
Yeah,
I always tell everybody is that it's all public funds.
yeah,
So in other words, if they're saying it's coming from student fees, or even if Micron Technology gives Boise State a gift to do a certain thing, the moment that money reaches the treasury, it is still public money and has to be treated that way. Otherwise, you can have any big donor give money to a public institution and then do their bidding, and that's not how that process is supposed to work.
yeah. And I mean, of course, even if the provost of inclusion and belonging is funded by a third party, I'm guessing that they have all of the facilities available to them, and that's all taxpayer facilities. They have an office, they have support staff. I can't imagine that all of that's covered by a third party. So I would say that it's a concern no matter what, and we have to question what we really want to be teaching the next generation of people. I mean, these are the teachers and doctors and attorneys and everybody else is coming out, and whatever their belief system is when they come out of college, they're likely to carry that into society and into Idaho culture.
It's a very big deal. To what degree are now? there's so much stuff. I mean, it's just really hard for you to tackle everything, but there are some things that you're supposed to do as a Senate Education Committee. For example, you're supposed to consider um, gubernatorial appointments. Well, not just the Education Committee, but the other
Yep.
committees. You're supposed to consider gubernatorial appointments. To what degree are the people who come to your committee, should they expect some really tough questions about, for example, I'm maybe a state board of education appointee or public charter school commission. To what degree should they expect a lot of accountability questions and questions about, critical race theory or various other types of indoctrination?
They should expect scrutiny. You know, we're a conservative Republican state. It doesn't make any sense to me at all for us to allow appointments of people that believe the opposite of the Republican platform. Like, what's the point of being of having the Republican Party have control of the legislature if we don't even look to see if the values are being propagated that are so important to us? So I would say that they should expect for some rigorous questioning, and we're going to be looking for the right people for the job, based on the values of the society that we have. And I mean, I'm representing constituents, and I think that they expect me to look at things with a high level of scrutiny. Now, does I'm going to balance that. I'm not. My goal isn't to embarrass anyone, and if I see somebody who's clearly not a part of, or aren't going to fit the criteria, I think that a lot of times we can handle that behind the scenes and say, hey, just so you know, we don't see this as a likely approval for your appointment. But of course, that's informal, and they can always come to the hearings and do whatever they want. But yeah,
I
we're
mean,
gonna.
is it such that, if an appointee comes over and says, um, yeah, I support, transgender bathrooms in schools, or, um, you know, maybe they have had a career of not holding public schools accountable. I'm not speaking of any particular person. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I mean, are those things that could possibly sink a nominee? I mean, if you had a nominee who, for example, going back to my example, in
Mhm.
their career or in their handling oversight of the education system, allowed transgender bathrooms, would that be detrimental to an appointee's prospects?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think it's really clear where the people in our communities stand on that. Obviously, there's some variety from one community to another, but uh, the vast majority are saying that they care about safety for um, girls, especially in their bathrooms and locker rooms. That's something it's not controversial. The only people that would say that that's an extreme stance are what I would say are the true extremists.
I like how you say that. Wonderful. I know it's getting late, and you've been at this for a long time. Probably haven't had dinner or anything like that yet. So, any other thoughts on the legislature and what you expect for this coming session?
Uh, I'd say just I'm really looking forward to it. There's a lot to learn, and I think there's like an assumption that the senators are going to come here and not get anything done because we have to learn. But I can tell you, we got a group here that's planning to both learn and get things done, and uh, and we're committed to that. We don't have time to waste anymore. So that's our commitment.
I have, and I say this to a lot of people. I have never seen a better class of freshmen, and I've seen a lot of legislators come and
Mhm.
go. But I met with every one of the freshman legislators, particularly in the Senate, and including you, and I have a lot of hope for this class. I think you guys are going to do a lot of great work, and I'm looking forward to. Want to have you back on again when the session is really underway, and there are some really controversial issues in front of you, and you're really having to cast some really difficult votes. But I appreciate you for coming on tonight and for answering some questions and at least introducing yourself to the audience, and look forward to getting you back again.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'll look forward to it.
Thank you, sir.
All right,
We'll see you another time. And we're going to be back, I think we're going to be back Tuesday with another guest. So be sure to join us then. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching.
Take care. Bye.
You've been listening to the Hoff Time Report with Wayne Hoffman. Be sure to visit idahofreedom.org for Wayne's articles, IFF research, and show notes from today's episode.